who can fake infect primarily, but it's affecting others. Nehemiah chapters 11 and 12 show the repopulation of the city and the dedication of the restored wall of Jerusalem. This is a phenomenal story. It is an amazing story, on par with God put Israel, the children of Israel, back into their homeland in 1948. So the city in this chapter is repopulated, and the dedication of the restored wall of Jerusalem was happening. Jerusalem had been without a wall for 142 years. That's a long time. From the destruction of the city by the Babylonians in 586 BC until the arrival of Nehemiah in 444 BC. The lack of a wall left the city unprotected. It was just a mess. It had been reduced to rubble and repeatedly looted of all of its valuables. Now, despite the opposition from the surrounding heathen people, including Sanballat and Tobias, two men who are synonymous, their names are synonymous with the distraction and hindrance of God's work. We use Tobias and Sanballat when we want to talk about people in the church or outside of the church trying to hinder the work of the church, who are trying to cause distraction, to try to get our minds off of the Lord and what the Lord wants done. Nehemiah and the returning Jews had worked hard to rebuild the temple under Zerubbabel and to build that wall. And the return of the people to God's commandments through the reading of the law by Ezra. This was a monumental work. This is one of the most glorious Jewish history. Nehemiah is not really seen like a Moses or a David, but I'm here to tell you, Nehemiah was somebody. Nehemiah, he was not, a crowned prince or anything like that. But, buddy, rid of their wives. The new wall of Jerusalem was finished, and we are told in Nehemiah 11:1 that 1/10 of the people were chosen, if you will, to repopulate. Nehemiah chapter 11, verse 12 tells us there were 822 priests who did the work of the temple. Verse tells that there were 242 chief of the fathers, or heads of families. And by the way, one of the reasons why I am preaching this interesting passage is because I have read Nehemiah many times before, and it just so happened a few days before Thanksgiving, God drops a gem. Verse 14 tells us of 128 mighty men of valor who were probably the defenders of the city. Verses 15 and 16 tells us of the Levites who maintained the outward business of the house of God. And then verse 17 names a very interesting person, Mattaniah, who was the principal to begin the Thanksgiving in prayer. Basically, as I told you yesterday, he was the minister of thanksgiving and prayer. He was the pastor of thanksgiving and prayer. Thanksgiving in prayer. Nehemiah 12:8 repeats his name and office. Moreover, the Levites, Jeshua, Binnui, Kadmiel, Sherebiah, Judah, and Mattaniah, which was over the thanksgiving, he and his brethren. And I told you earlier how this was a monumental move of God through Nehemiah. This was a major work. And what we're so impressed with about Nehemiah, he was not only a strong leader, a man with vision and drive, a man who had contacts in high places to make things happen. He was the king's cupbearer. He had to be a man of integrity and honor and trust. But he was a man who was humble, meek and lowly like Jesus, that he would get down there, and even though he was no doubt a leader and seen as a leader, at one point called the governor, but he would get down there and work just like everybody else. He was something special. And so this was a very, very tough job. This time represents a time of tribulation and trouble, trials on every hand. Sanballats and Tobiases trying to mess up the plans of building the wall, restoring the people. It's one thing to be down there throwing rocks at Nehemiah and trying to get his attention and trying to distract him. There's another thing when you start writing letters to the king about what these Jews are doing. Now you really get into some serious persecution when you start sending letters to the king about what these Jews are doing down here and how they're gonna rebel against you, king. This was a great time of tribulation, coming out of tribulation, coming out of being exiled, coming out of all of that traveling back and forth, dealing with the heathen all around. And here you coming back with just a few people to reclaim your land after 100 and something years, man, that's, God was in it. But that was rough. That was tough. They slept with their clothes on. They had a tool in one hand and a sword in another. This was some hard work. This was a difficult time. And it was a touch and go time. Humanly speaking, they didn't know how this was going to work out. God knew, but they didn't know. But Nehemiah had faith in God. And he had the folks working, and man, they flat did it. By the grace and power of God. But it was rough going. Dark nights. The people had to sleep in shifts and had to sleep with the clothes on and a sword in one hand, a tool in another, trying to rebuild the wall. Miles away from home and comfort, sacrificing. This was a time of tribulation coming out of tribulation. And yet, they saw the need to make sure that the minister of thanksgiving was in place. The giving of thanks to God was a matter of prime importance. That's why they had a minister of thanksgiving, the pastor of thanksgiving. The newly restored Jews felt it necessary to have an official director of thanksgiving. And thanksgiving is important. And it is something, if you are a child of God, that God will put on your heart. How that you need to be thankful for what I'm doing in restoring the wall and the people. And they put Mattaniah and his fellow Levites in charge of leading all of the people in an outpouring of gratitude to God for restoring them to the promised land. This was no small thing, my dear friends. But see, that's how God is. God would take this was an impossible situation. God will take an impossible situation, do the impossible, and what he wants us to do is to be thankful. And we can tell stories about God doing the impossible just with the people who are alive today and never end that conversation, because God has done it many, many times over. But he expects us to have an attitude of gratitude. And sad to say, so many of us, we don't have it, especially when times are rough, when things are difficult, and there's fighting on every side, within and without. And Dr. Matthew Henry said, it is said of another that he was the principal to begin the thanksgiving in prayer. Now, you know what thanksgiving in prayer is. That means that you're praying, and one of the first things you need to be doing is thanking God. Amen, somebody. See, God will put that in your heart. I don't know if I've ever started a prayer without thanking God first, giving him the praise first. That's not me. That's the Holy Spirit of God in me. Probably he had a good ear and a good voice and was a singer as well. You know, those gifted ones in the church. And therefore was chosen to lead the psalm and to focus everybody's attention on giving God thanks in prayer. He was precentor in the temple. Thanksgiving is necessary in prayer. God expects it. God looks for it. Because he is the one back in the land, in the midst of tribulation and trouble and trials and fightings within and without. And people trying to stop you and people messing, going over your head and trying to put things in the king's mind about you and all other such foolishness. That's some serious stuff right there. When people start messing with the one who's providing the money and the help to help you do what you need to do. Trying to falsely accuse them. That's difficult because, see, you got to come back with another letter and you got to go back and talk with the king and make sure the king understands what's going on. And that just takes up a whole lot of time. When they start messing with you like that. I can handle you throwing rocks at me down there, you bothering me and trying to distract me, I can deal with that. But when you start messing with my source of income and my blessing and my favor, then we got a problem. Because see, Nehemiah found favor in the sight of the king. And may I say to you, things like this don't get done without God's favor. They just don't get done by, mere determination. You got to have God's favor, meaning God's got to touch people's hearts who have the power to get stuff done. Yes. And Nehemiah had that. Nehemiah was a blessed man. He had favor in the sight of the king. He was a faithful man. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of character. And so the king believed in him and trusted him and gave him what he needed to build the wall in Jerusalem and to restore the people of God. Thanksgiving is necessary in prayer. They should go together. Give thanks for former mercies. Giving thanks for former mercies is a becoming way of begging further mercies. Did you get that? I hope you did. I hope you understand that. See, what's wrong with so many of the people in the church today? The attitude and the mentality is, what have you done for me lately, God? You know why? Because they're so selfish. You have people like that who are so selfish and so concerned about what they can get now. Acting like juveniles, acting like little children. God has blessed you with millions of blessings, and yet you won't even give him thanks for those, and you want some more. You come looking at God's hand and not his heart. You don't even know God. God does not even know you. And that's a problem. See, this is why Thanksgiving is so important. Dr. Matthew Henry made it very clear here. Thanking God for past mercies and blessings is a becoming way, a great way of begging further for further mercies and blessings. But make sure you're thorough in your thanksgiving in the past, in the midst of your tribulations, and God is in the process of bringing you out. And even if he's not, be very thorough in thanking God in detail for the favor and blessings and mercies of the past. Very much so, in detail. I hope that you people, if you are 55 and above, I hope, bless your heart, or 50 and above, I hope that you have precious memories. You know what precious memories do for you? They remind you to be thankful about all of the blessings of the past. You've forgotten all of those wonderful things God did for you in the past. There were Thanksgivings in the past, you needed a box. Now here you are giving boxes to people like you never needed a box in the past. You yourself, you needed a turkey. And now you have the mind and the privilege and the means to give somebody else a turkey. And by the way, bless your heart, give what you can. But on Thanksgiving, if you're going to give people something, please give them a turkey. Because they can eat on that turkey for 3 or 4 days. I feel sorry for you if you don't have precious memories with your family, with your children. If you've had many Thanksgivings, don't even know they have it. They said today in the news, it is the young people, 20-somethings, college-age students, who are driving this increase in this plague, because they don't even have any symptoms or anything, and they're just passing it along to the grandmothers and grandfathers and aunties and uncles and so forth and so on. The doctors and the nurses are begging us, please stay home this Thanksgiving. Because we're going to have, I'm just telling you what they're saying, we're going to have hell to pay. And when they say we, they're talking about them, the doctors and the nurses. It's a threat to their lives as well. And these people are just as called to being a doctor and a nurse as you're called to preach. I believe police officers are called to be police officers. Yes, we got bad police officers, some bad apples, yes, that's right. Hey, but hold up. We got some bad preachers too, some bad apples, and God got to get rid of all of them. And we got some bad doctors as well. We got a mean old doctor down here in Texas somewhere. He had a fertility business service going on. Coming to find out, all the women who came, they didn't get the sperm that they asked for. They got his. The devil. Okay? So we got bad apples in every area. But the doctors and nurses are begging us, pleading with us, please don't go to Thanksgiving dinner with the family. Please don't travel. Please don't come together.